Hello, second years. For those that don't know me, I'm Paul. I've taught some, if not all of you, some of the relational shiatsu weekends in the first year, and I was due to teach you this weekend with Heather to do another relational shiatsu weekend. But once again, COVID and lockdown has got in the way, and I'm sorry to say that it's impacting our course in the way that it is. But I thought I'd do a bit of video material just so you've got something to chew over this weekend. And I'm hoping that there'll be two videos. One just a sort of monologue seminar from me, and hopefully a Zoom conversation with myself and Heather, talking a bit about what we mean by relational shiatsu and how it may be relevant in this stage of the course. So the first thing I thought about when doing a little video on relational shiatsu was, well, why call it relational shiatsu? Why make this distinction between Zen shiatsu or any other tradition? What are we trying to do? And I think the simple answer to that is, by calling this relational shiatsu, I'm trying to bring a focus and a specific attention to the position that we put ourselves in relation to the client when we do shiatsu. And that's I'm suggesting that for a number of reasons. One of the first reasons is that there's a tradition in the shiatsu world which assumes a certain expert position in relation to the client. And this is quite popular for practitioners, but it's also a popular position for clients to put us in, that we are the vessels of some sort of mystical knowledge and some kind of magic that we're going to bestow upon the client, which is going to fix them, and that classic shiatsu word, balance them, balance their energy. And we noticed that there's evidence in this in still some of the language today. Some of the shiatsu books you'll read will talk about with kyo, that you tonify kyo and that you disperse jitsu and so on. And what this does is it misrepresents our role and our correct position as a shiatsu practitioner in relation to the client. I'm not in a position where I can tonify a client's energy or disperse it. They disperse their energy, they gather their energy as and where they need it. What I can do through meeting them, through listening to them, through attending to them, by paying attention to their body in the areas that feel energetically, emotionally neglected or missed, or by directing some power and potency and meeting some of the areas that feel very congested, tight, overemphasized, overused, then a person can begin to develop a fuller awareness of what's happening in their energy field in their body, and begin to balance things themselves, essentially. Balance, I don't think, is a useful word in this context, but there it is. So what we've noticed in the therapy world per se, and somewhat beyond that, over the last, I would say, 50 or 60 years, has been a very strong transition away from the expert position of the therapist, be it in psychotherapy, in psychoanalysis, or in other traditions, to recognizing something of an equality between the client and the practitioner. One way that took shape in the psychoanalytic world is in the old days, the analyst would sit there and they would reveal nothing about themselves, and all that happened in the room was a product of the client and their neurosis and the transference or the projection that they were having on the therapist. And there was a sort of an assumption that was running here in the therapy world, that the therapist was in some way pure or rarefied and was therefore not in any way affecting the relational field in the room between the client and practitioner. And slowly but surely it became recognizing that it was, of course, nonsense, and it simply wasn't true. And psychoanalysis had to begin to appreciate and accommodate that the practitioner does have an impact on what's happening. And what began to notice in psychotherapy, a chap called Martin Buber brought in this idea of what's called his book I Thou referred to a dynamic called it and thou. They're two ways of relating. And this is what I'm putting an emphasis on with this relational shiatsu, is that we can relate to people as an it or a thou. When you're in a rush somewhere, you're trying to get somewhere, you've got some sort of, I don't know, an old person driving on the road in front of you and they're in your way, you can very quickly begin to relate to them as an it. And how you're then relating to them is as if they're an object or something in your way, and in no way you're relating to them as an alive, emotional human being who's got their own story, who's got their own narrative going on for why they're doing what they're doing. Suddenly, they're just an object in your way. That's what you might call it relating. Thou relating is when we know we have a shared humanity with that person and we actually have a meaningful relationship with them. And this is what's known as thou. And so there began a tradition in the psychotherapy world of cultivating the thou relationship, noticing our shared humanity. Now in shiatsu, we're still adjusting to that, ironically. The thou dynamic in shiatsu gets missed by things like tonify, disperse, these old acupuncture terms, some of the traditional Chinese medicine ways that we've adopted in shiatsu have actually apprehended the relational aspect of touch, and what they've done instead is replaced them with quite medical terms. So I wrote an article about this a number of years ago called Treating and Meeting, which highlighted this spectrum of relationship, which moves from a more objectified position in which we're an expert, which is a more medical model, over to the meeting position, which is we're two human beings who are meeting each other. Shiatsu, in my experience, works much better when we move towards that end of the spectrum, when we move towards the meeting place. My hand's in contact with this person and I'm experiencing them as a human being and they're receiving me as a human being. I'm not performing magic on them. I'm not going to balance them. I'm not going to manipulate their chi. I'm not going to transform their meridians. I'm a human being in contact with them, paying attention to them. I might feel moved by them. I might feel touched by them. I might feel irritated by them. I might feel blocked by them. All manner of dynamics happen in the relationship that we can be interested in and pay attention to. And that is one of the big invitations in relational shiatsu, is to awaken our curiosity about the relational dynamic in the I thou, in the me and you. How are you seeing me and what are you doing with me and what am I doing with you? How am I being myself with you and how are you being yourself with me? And how does that show up in the shiatsu? So that's one possibility, is paying attention to how am I relating, how am I touched and being touched in this dance that we call shiatsu. And in those terms, I prefer to see the shiatsu as a relational encounter instead of a kind of massage that we do to the other person. And sadly, that tradition is still very much alive in the shiatsu world. Now, another dynamic that can creep up, and it's somewhat, let me try and contextualize that. You might say, in terms of 5 elements, when we adopt the expert position, we're shifting into something of a overemphasized metal element. We've adopted a boundaried, crystallized, rigid position, which negates some of our shared humanity with the client. Now, something of a polarity to that is sometimes we adopt a caretaker position, the rescuer position. And this is also very common relational tendency within shiatsu, which is we want to nurture. We want to have the client feel that the shiatsu was lovely. We're too invested in them enjoying it. We're too invested in them liking us. And in this position, we're beginning to relate actually from something of a needy position. We're wanting something. We've got an investment in how the receiver experiences the shiatsu. And this is what I refer to as the caretaker position or rescuing position. For example, one aspect of this is in the caretaker position is that you see that there's a vulnerability, you imagine there's a vulnerability in the client that it's your job to take care of. One of the ways that can show up is there'll be a strong reluctance to use more dynamic shiatsu, to be challenging, to be confronting in some way in the work, because we're too invested in believing that the client is too vulnerable, too tired, too something to receive the amount of energy that shiatsu could bring. And of course, these are projections. What happens is we project our own vulnerable, neglected self onto the client, and then we attend to them. Now, this dynamic is very common in not just in the shiatsu world, but in the therapeutic arena, is that we assume a vulnerability that is in fact ours. And we've come to have neglected it and to miss it, but we see it out in the world and we attend to that. What happens then in both of these instances, the one where we're the expert or the one where we're the caretaker, is that we miss the full range of human aliveness that can happen when we come into contact with each other. We've closed the aperture of the possibility of the richness of a human, two human beings meeting each other. So a good quality to look for in the shiatsu is it feeling flat? Is it feeling bored? Is it feeling safe? Is it feeling comfortable? And where's the aliveness? Where's the curiosity? Where's the interest and stimulation that's going on? There's a possibility for aliveness in human contact. And there's all sorts of ways that we and others modify ourselves to numb and sort of nullify that sense of aliveness. Relational shiatsu is a calling to be curious again, curious enough about how we are relating, about how the client is relating, that we begin to find each other in a fuller, more vibrant, more vivid way. There's lots more that I could say about that, and who knows, I might feel inspired to do some more videos. But I'd like to cover some of this ground in conversation with Heather. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope this makes some sense to you. Any kind of questions or reflections on this, please do let me know. I very much look forward to us having a relational shiatsu weekend together in the forthcoming months. Thanks. Bye bye now.